So we'll just take a moment to acknowledge each of our rectangles or squares. Feeling each other's presence. So we begin our session today, continuing our exploration of the profound teachings of the symbol lineage of the 21 gestures type approach. At a time in the world which, has been called the Kali Yuga by the masters of the past, a time prophesied to have increased plague, famine, and war, with natural disasters and a poisoning of the 5 elements and environmental problems because of it. And then also psychological and emotional upheaval due to the instability of the time. So that does sound like now, doesn't it? Unfortunately. And on the other side of the coin, our practice really does matter. It doesn't necessarily matter in the sense that our compassion practice or our wisdom practice necessarily immediately can remove the condition of samsara, because that's actually not up to any one person. That's up to every person. And so it is really a group effort, but that doesn't mean that we then stop our own contribution to that group effort. That would be going at a high speed on the wrong direction of the highway of the spiritual path. So we continue. And the thing is, it's easy to get disheartened at times, but it's also possible to become nourished, especially by this intimate kind of support that we provide each other. And then also through our own practice, just feeling how the difference between when we offer ourselves to practice or offer practice to ourselves, and we see what it can do for the ability we have to meet this moment the best that we can, and with the fullest heart and most present awareness. So it's always a good idea to know why we're practicing, because we can sit down like any activity. We can just kind of get into a good habit or a bad habit depending on whether the activity brings us health or harm. But in this case, a healthy activity of spiritual practice and meditation, it's good to have that regular routine. But then every once in a while, even the race cars that go around in circles have to stop for pit stops, get new tires and go, wait, what are we doing here? Oh, you're going in circles really fast. Okay, got it. But I would argue we are not doing the same thing. But that part of the analogy is similar. Taking a moment, a break to just check in with ourselves, because we're always changing and growing and everything around us is changing. So I'll lead us in with a little bit of practice through the gestures and then explain some of the particular practices and then we'll discuss and explore together. So we're going to start with the first gesture. Just being, natural aliveness as itself, nothing to accomplish, nothing left undone. And if you like, we can go through the sub-practices. The second sub-practice after just opening and resting is, as we know, the tighten and release. The only thing I'll say about it is Don't tighten so much that you break anything. Don't hurt yourself. Just tighten enough to feel like as many of your muscles as you can are somewhat or moderately engaged. You can go too far, I think, or you just really are like, it's not necessary to go that far. Just getting most all of them engaged. Starting at the core, the legs, the arms, the shoulders, the head, back, the face. And hold it a little longer, and then release. And practice a sighing of the the ah. No stretching. We call that smoking the duns out of the cave, and it is a gesture that indicates sometimes we have unconscious patterns or holding in our body mind. And of course, if we just relax while those unconscious tightenings are going on, we feel kind of like, why isn't anything working? Why am I still so irritated or agitated? Well, often there's some clenching that we don't notice. So here we just sort of universally clench and release. And the third, sub practice, just being, tighten, release. Now we do a subtler version of that where we just raise the shoulders, tighten a little bit of the muscles, not very much lighter. Then we brighten the eyes, feel the vividness. Then we drop the shoulders, relax, brighten the eyes. Okay. And do that 2 more times. These are meditative skills for how to notice our energy, our life force, how to work with awareness, because awareness contains energy, it has cognizance and motility, these 2 elements. So it can move and it can create, but it knows what it creates. So we want to be able to kind of bring together lucidity and creativity, and also the kind of running our little engine through its paces. What is it like when we get tight and then brighten and then relax? It's sort of like, oh, I can notice my tightness. I can expand my window of tolerance for being lucid while being tight. Interestingly enough, the eyes, there are said to be 3 gazes in. One is the gaze of the Shravakas, or the hearers, or the peaceful monks, you could say, or the inner kind of lower gaze. Looking ahead is the gaze of the Bodhisattva. And the reason they say that is because the Bodhisattvas are like, okay, who needs help? Who needs a bandage? You got to look straight ahead. You can't look down. Who needs help? But come over here because I can't see you. So we look up, Now, there's a third kind of gaze, which is sometimes called the wrathful gaze of the Heruka, but I think of it more of the lion's gaze, or the gaze of, it's kind of, well, you'll see Padmasambhava, he's got, those pictures where his eyes are like, so that's what we're doing, widening the eyes. And why do we do that? Well, yeah, I don't know. I'm just kidding. No, I know why. It raises our vividness and intensity, right? But normally when we do that, if we're alert or frightened, our nervous system goes into fight or flight, we're activated. Here, if we do it while feeling safe, it activates a kind of brightness and an energy to perception. So just something to have in our toolkit, and it's meant, and when you say wrathful, by the way, I should say that it's not like angry at someone. It's compassion that is very intense and fierce. So we could call it fierce compassion. Sometimes called, a friend of ours, Jeff, who's come to some of our things over there, calls it fierce love. Talks about that a lot. So that's a great way of thinking of it, right? It's not, I mean, you could be angry. I don't want to take away from the brilliance of the anger in it, but it's not just that you're angry at something. It's also this profound, compassionate anger. Sometimes we call it mommy anger or daddy anger, but it's not just angry. It's also like roused with care and readiness, and a powerful level of vividness. Okay, skillful means skillful action. So I bring those up because those three gazes, are sort of in different practices, and it's just nice to know people have thought about these things. We're not alone in our funny little things we're doing. In the third, the third, because I skipped the first one, but I just sat there for a second, but there's four. This is the fourth one. In the fourth one, we practice wonder, opening our mouth, opening the eyes. And it's much gentler than the wrathful gaze or the intense brightening, but it's just kind of like, wow, whoa. What are some other phrases? Ah, wow. Now, I emphasize this one as wonder, but it has two sides. I'm laughing because the analogy I'm giving is we had these, my best friend and I had these figures that we wanted to make our own figures. We had these character, and it's very funny, Kenny and Roger. Yeah, I know, Kenny Rogers. I know, we probably got it from that. But anyway, we had Kenny and Roger. Mike was Kenny, he had Roger. And he was bigger than me, he's a little taller than me. So he always had bigger figures. I had littler figures. But no one made our figures because they were our figures. So we had to, sorry, this just cracks me up so much. We had to design our own figures. So I took Bo, the blonde guy from Dukes of Hazzard, and I put a Klingon outfit on him, which is funny in its own right. Okay, so that was cool. My friend had the guy from the $8 million, the $1 Million Man. I forget what that guy's. Anyway, he had a bigger figure that he just put on some different outfit. My character, Kenny, who was Bo, had this giant guffaw, like just always on his face. And so we'd be in a serious situation, and I would just get pissed off because and Matt would start laughing. I'm like, all right, we gotta, and Matt's like, this, by the way, just so you know, my best friend Matt went on he makes toys professionally for a living now. So this story has extra level of sweetness to it, because like he was always like messing with toys and like trying to make them better. He was modding them from a young age. So he's like, I've got this. He was like, are you sure you want to do this? I was like, we've got to get rid of that smile. He's like, I've got this. And he just took a lighter to his face, just melted the bottom part of his face. And then we're both like, that didn't work. So then he had a ninja mask from that point on. And we just put a ninja, and he looked so much cooler. Much more versatile too. So when we were in Syracuse, anyway, believe it or not, this story may have some small amount of relevance to what we're doing today. All right, so which is that there are two aspects to the fourth sub-practice. One is the wonder that I've been emphasizing lately, so the opening the mouth and the widening the eyes. But just like Kenny's face, it's not always that would be the only way to practice. And other times we might be, it's good to bring wonder. I will just say this first. It's good to try to bring wonder to situations we don't want to, because it's fascinating. You know, we're what is I can't remember what the famous lucid dreamer calls lucid dreamers. He had like something knots. I can't remember, not cosmonauts, but anyway, some name he made up, you know, like dreamonauts, you know. Anyway, people who explore the mind through lucid dreaming, we're kind of like that, right? We're like explorers. So I like to think of trying different kinds of explorations. And the other practice that's implied in the fourth yoga or fourth gateway or fourth sub practice of the first gesture is not just wonder, which is what we've been emphasizing, but also what's called natural honesty. Natural honesty, which is, or sometimes I call it natural prajna. Now, there's a definite connection, like two wings of the bird, right? When we have wonder, for one thing, when we're practicing that way, we kind of cut through our projections a little bit, right? Because we're like, it's the opposite of going, you know, looking like, I don't know about this place. I don't know who's here, what's going on. You know, you come in a room and you're in a bad mood or something. It's the opposite. You come in the room and you're like, who's here? You know, so you can see how for our meditation, those are very different kinds of states of mind or states of heart, right? So, but the natural honesty or natural prajna is connected to wonder, but it's the aspect of wonder that's like, I'm willing to look at things without deception. I'm willing to look without projection. I'm willing to look without, what is it, like preconception? Or I'm gonna I'll notice my preconceptions and I'll be like, okay, but I wonder. So isn't that interesting? In wonder, there's also this natural honesty, or what we call natural clarity or natural prajna. So the reason that is helpful is when we move into the later third gesture, we're working on bringing out some of this skill, that wonder / natural clarity, natural honesty that comes from that openness. We're working with that because it's a great way to see deeper into ourselves and to notice when we're tilting the pinball machine a little, or parts of us are starting to kind of get prominent. And I just say this with parts, you know, these different parts of us. When we practice bodhicitta and we can think of another person's perspective, it's hard to be blended with a part, right? That's the beauty of bodhicitta, right? You awaken the heart and you go, wait, but what are you feeling? Right away, there's more than one perspective. And that's the non-blending, non-eclipsing is the term we would say, right? It's not, we're not eclipsed into a part. And another way of saying it is also when we're practicing that for ourselves, like, oh, let me feel all the different perspectives in myself. Again, it's also hard to just prefer one part of ourselves or one perspective of where we might feel a strong feeling, but we're like, okay, that's there, but what about other feelings that are happening too, right? And so opening that sense of almost like bodhicitta for our other parts, for all of our parts, right? So that we're not just preferring one perspective. It's the same thing. It's like inner social, well, we call it inner family system, right? So it's inner bodhicitta, right? It's like, oh, there's room for different viewpoints here. Do you see how that mind opens up and the heart opens up? And it's like, so this is a practice that we work with, right? Is being able to bring our true nature as sort of the arena or space in which we can hear and listen to the different parts of ourselves without bias. And wonder or natural honesty is a big part. It's a component, right? I'm kind of like talking to you like I'm a chef, right? And I'm giving you all the ingredients. I'm saying, oh, you gotta have the garlic. You gotta, of course. That's, and then, you know, what kind of oil are you? So I'm just talking about the different ingredients of different practices. You know, different meals, they use similar ingredients, but they go in different directions, just like our different gestures. But it's nice to talk about the ingredients. So that's some of the ingredients, with a special emphasis on the natural clarity of wonder. And now let's briefly just go through the second gesture a little bit. And then there's change, right? Everything's going fine. You're minding your own business. You feel great about everything, and something changes. Darn it. Change, right? So being alive, natural aliveness leads to experiencing natural change. And we put our hand on our heart and we just feel like, ooh, things keep changing. And this we call poignancy, right? To feel change, to acknowledge change, to also acknowledge the preciousness that time is passing. Now, I won't tour us through the sub practices here per se. That's it's, for today. That's not really our focus, but um, just a brief touching in on this powerful part of being human, right? That we, and it's one of the components that we often talk about is as the nature of suffering, right? The three kinds of suffering are suffering of, I would call it the suffering of incarnation in the four elements. So birth, old age, sickness, and death, just the challenge of being in a conditioned body that has a lifespan. That's not a bad thing, but it has its moments of suffering and it can be hard. Then the one that I think of more as the dissatisfaction of dukkha is the second kind of suffering, which is called the suffering of change, right? We will be parted from things we don't want to be parted from, and we will encounter things we do not want to encounter. And that's just, we know that that's the nature of samsara, right? There's no escaping it. And there's no amount of practice that can stop that. There's no amount of good fortune that will evade us from that forever. It's part of life. The third level of suffering, it's more that subtle feeling of duality that, we feel separate from things. But we work really hard on that in this group, right? Connecting with nature, feeling a part of it, meditating, recognizing we're part of things. And all the gestures are about kind of melting that. So that one, it's funny. I almost feel like that's an easy one for us because we'll work on that. The middle one, there's nothing you can do about it except open your heart and feel it and be brave and be kind and be compassionate to yourself and to others. But as Trungpa Rinpoche said when he was 9, with Sechen Kongtrul, his teacher, will pain ever go away? And Sechen Kongtrul said, no, but your relationship to it will change. So that's what we can do. We can develop a more whole relationship to change and to pain and to all of it, right? We can bring more appreciation, more spaciousness, more love. We can do that. So that's cool. But I do like to always remind myself and you and all of us, like, it's not about getting rid of pain. Please do not waste your time thinking about that. That is such a dead end. It will never happen. Moving on. No, I'm kidding. To our next session. No, but it's an important point, right? It's important to touch that for a moment and just feel there is pain in life, right? We know that. And sometimes we feel fantastic. And sometimes we get shocked and go, oh no, now I'm feeling sad again. Sometimes we feel sad for a long, long time. Then we feel happy and say, oh no, I've been sad so long. So the change happens, but just the tenderness, the love of ourselves, the sympathy for ourselves, and the sharing that with each other, our fellow beings, human, animal, and other. So yeah, isn't it interesting? We talk about the second gesture a lot, about mono no aware, the beautiful sadness of being able to appreciate transience, to be able to say, oh, It's heartbreaking, it's bittersweet, but it's also beautiful, instead of resisting it and fighting it. That sense of, may I appreciate the human condition and the tenderness of, and that tender heart of sadness, you know? Yeah. And then we move into the bulk of our exploration for today, the third gesture. We move into creating this, what I've called sometimes the tree of life, the first part. That's a phrase in the Jewish tradition, but I think it's in many traditions, right? The idea of it. It's a very powerful spiritual. Here, I think of all the branches as different memories. And when we bring together a branch or finger, it's almost like bringing that tenderness, that sad joy, that wonder, that clarity to a particular formative experience in our life, a memory, an event that held portent or held gravitas, as they say, right? Which is the sense of deep meaning or importance for our journey. So we'll just spend a few minutes together doing this practice, and you can use the hands together or not, but this is what we're working on, is just remembering some key moments and bringing unconditional sympathy to ourselves around them, and healing and just awareness, just listening to ourselves, feeling what it feels like right now to remember that event. While I do this practice, I don't worry so much about chronology or whether or not I'm picking the best memories. It's really more free, associative, like just letting yourself encounter what comes to mind with. And of course, the hands in front of the heart in the Anjali doing this, it reminds us of our heart, and the poignancy of the last gesture, and just the sympathy, because sometimes we can go, oh no, that event or that time. But if we come into the heart and go, oh, I'm looking from the safety of now at that time, and just with as much sympathy as I can generate, that can be very healing. And there's no agenda to like make something happen, but it could be helpful. Maybe it's not, immediately helpful, and we can move to another memory whenever we want. It's up to us. So I thought we'd just take a few moments to kind of discuss anything that's come up so far, and then we'll take a short break, and then we'll move into the second section of our gathering and go a little deeper. I just wanted to set the ground and kind of give some of the elements, and then we'll be able to build on that in our second hour. But anything anyone would like to share so far about what's coming up or anything going on right now in their practice or life?
So with this third gesture, I was remembering a moment in my backyard when my grandkids were here around Christmas time. And I was teaching them how to use kind of a toy bow and arrow. And my older grandchild, my almost 10 now, but feisty, wonderful, incredible granddaughter was, really micromanaging my grandson, my younger grandson. And, I asked her several times to, just give him some space, and she just wouldn't. And so a very fierce protective part of me came up for him and also for her. Because she is such an incredible, feisty, courageous little girl. And yet her bossiness, not just with her brother, but in other situations. And so I kind of fiercely took some action to protect her brother. And yet I look at that and I also realize how much that fierce protector took over. And I regret, because I basically removed us from her brother and I from the backyard. We went to the front yard. I wish I had just taken a moment to just look back at her with compassion, or talked with her about that later. Because I realize now how eclipsed I was. And I do know I was fiercely protective of both of them, but I don't know if she knew that.
Oh, it's so beautiful, and thank you for sharing that. I can personally really relate to like when I regret something because there's so much love there, and there was love there all along. But then I'm like, oh wow, what could I have done better? And without that being like a, hitting myself, or just like a super gentle, loving question, like what could I have done differently that might have been more. Oh, that's like, it's gorgeous. Um, Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think it's great. I think this is exactly what I learn anyway from doing this. Sometimes it's like, oh wow, what could I have done different? Maybe I could have, but like just even having that wonder and the clarity, the natural clarity to go, okay, the natural honesty of, oh well, I don't know. Well, yeah, I really did care, but blank, so like that is such, thank you for modeling that what we're doing. That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
I am so glad that you spent as much time as you did unpacking the second gesture and those different ways of or different ways of suffering that are associated with change and different kinds of change that we all encounter. And just I'm feeling that big time these days. Being parted from things that I didn't want to be parted from. Just all of it, but hadn't really labeled it as that. Um, and so doing that and kind of experiencing it through that lens gave me a new way of being with it in this, that it's not supposed to be happening. And it just, yeah, it made it a little bit easier to be with those different flavors of pain without getting lost in them, but sort of actually being able to open to them a little bit
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. I mean, thank you, Janet, for sharing that, because what I feel like for what we're working with is like acceptance and sympathy, acceptance of transience and suffering, that it's not our fault. It just happens. It's part of life. And then sympathy with like, oh wow, what was it like to be me in that moment? And what might, and then the natural clarity or the wonder or natural honesty can even come in and go, wow, I wonder double entendre intended, what I might have done differently, or that could come in, but it can also be like, wow, I wonder, just that feeling of creative, or the intelligence or the progeny is re-invited in the situation. Now, if we don't do it that way, the alternative, right, is we have change and we feel like I'm screwing up. We get upset with ourselves, and then we practice not sympathy, but our protectors get active and we start criticizing ourselves. See, you screwed up. You're suffering. We don't like this. You shouldn't have done that. And, you should do better. And you shouldn't do this and shouldn't do that. And it's like, so that's literally like, I find that one so common, right? Like something happens that causes suffering for me or others. And then and then my protectors get activated either as critic or, as a self-critic or
If
as
you
someone.
were better, this wouldn't be happening.
Right. Like if I was better, I wouldn't be suffering if I had my shit together. That wonderful line. Yeah. Yeah. Right. That doesn't work. I mean, you can have your shit together all you want, still get the three kinds of suffering, sadly, so yeah, exactly. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Lori, do you have anything you want to share? No, not yet. Okay. Stephen, what are you noticing? Anything you want to share right now or not yet? Not yet. Okay. Well, let's take a 7-minute break and then we will go a little deeper. Okay. All right. So when we talk about love in the Buddhist tradition, we sometimes the term is maitri or loving kindness, but in some ways, when I think of love, it's not just loving kindness, but sort of the I think of it more as the bodhicitta, the awakened heart mind. And I see that because I feel like in love, there's always compassionate action that comes about, right? When you love, you want to remove the suffering of others. So the definitions in Buddhism sometimes are loving kindness is wanting people to have happiness, and compassion is wanting to remove their suffering. But when I think of them brought together, they're said to be together in the supreme thought of laksam, or the bodhicitta, the highest aspiration, or the kind of culmination of those two aspects of loving kindness and compassion. To me, in our culture, love is the closest or the strongest word for that. And then, of course, you have to account for the notion of ultimate and relative. Ultimate love or ultimate bodhicitta is our true nature. And there are many ways that we will explore our true nature. In fact, all of the gestures explore that. And they highlight it in different facets. But as we go through further, we'll have more and more methods for recognizing and resting and gaining confidence in our true nature, so that we can access more wisdom and love, or compassion and loving kindness. So in many ways, when we start with the first gesture, it's really about um, just being, not even meditating per se, but being willing to be open. And I thought we could do a little guided meditation here, which can help with that. The first time we started, I started teaching these things and we started exploring this, I would do the senses meditation. And I thought we could bring that back in and go a little deeper with it, because it has actually, it really is sort of like the first sub practice, or the first practice of this first gesture really is about that. I've emphasized the part of it just being, not doing anything, non-meditating, but that's really kind of the fruition too. It's fun to do both, right? You can play with it. And I like to give you all the ingredients and let you feel into how you make sense of it, because we're all so unique and individual, and we have our own particular wirings and things that so that's, I really like to account for that. So this is another way of practicing the first gesture, which is the five senses meditation. But I will add a very important instruction I haven't given before on it at the end. So that'll be fun. And that will lead us into this further exploration of love. So to begin with, we take a moment and we just notice sights. You can look around or you can be still. And you're just noticing shapes and colors. And as usual, we're noticing our sixth consciousness, the thinking mind, might label things or comment on our sensory field of vision, but that's okay. We just include that as part of the space. We don't try to repress it, stop it. We don't also add to it. We just let it be part of the space. So we have our attention on sights. And then we move to sounds, bringing our attention to the ears and to sounds in our environment. What can you hear? And then we move to smells. You can smell the air of your room, which might be subtle, or in your hand or shirt or an object. Yeah. Oops. I breathed into my incense and was blind. Covered myself. And of course, taste. I didn't get any in my mouth, but if you have something to drink. And then moving to touch, to the body, to weight and gravity and temperature and all the feelings of the sensations of the body. And now we practice the layering. So we layer touch with taste. Touch, taste, and smell. Touch, taste, smell, sounds. Touch, taste, smell, sounds, sights. Opening to all of the senses, including the sixth sense of thinking. Touch, taste, smell, sound, sights, and thoughts. However they manifest in our experience, they're just part of the space of experience. So here we're just noticing, and this is a wonderful way of a foundation or preliminary for just being, because we can notice the mind focalizing or energetically focusing, and that can lead to the eclipse. As we know, if we focus on something or it gets our focus and we focus, we can get withdrawn from being able to layer or include. So here we're just allowing ourselves to see when we kind of move towards certain objects or certain senses, and here we're just letting them all be together, one big family. And now the most subtle instruction, which I thought I would add here, is like unclenching a fist, can we practice dissolving the um, distinction between senses, but actually just let all the senses go unlabeled or undifferentiated as one expanse of reality or awareness? In other words, we don't have to think about them as different. We could accommodate all of it at once and open to the idea that they are not really separate, that it's one whole experience with multiple ways of it being all at once. Here we might just notice the thinking mind as not really separate, just part of the senses. They're all part of each other, one whole. We will dive into that instruction further in the future, but it's fun to just play with. For now, we'll continue forward with just open awareness, spaciousness, inclusivity. And, it's said that spaciousness of awareness is so tender and gentle. It's so soft. It's the essence or nature of love because it's so accommodating. It's so accepting. It's so allowing. It's so present and validating in that spaciousness um, allows for all of our parts to be seen and felt. And so here, this ultimate level of love we'll be practicing is really, in the very traditional way of talking about it, you could say trak jo kadak, or cutting through to primordial purity. Another way of saying that is um, seeing through the ways that we avoid our basic goodness, like seeing through them, and then we arrive in our basic goodness. So these are Dzogchen terminology or phrase, but what it means for us is that when practicing the traditional idea of trekcho or cutting through is that you rest in your nature, your ultimate nature, and accommodate all relative appearances in an inseparability. You don't prefer the ultimate over the relative. You don't prefer the relative over the ultimate. In other words, you are accommodating, but you notice your thoughts and parts coming up, but you don't focalize on them in eclipse. Or if you do, you come back to the spaciousness, but still honor the parts or thoughts that are going on. And I think that that's really, obviously that's not easy to do, but that's just important to know that that's always been in the tradition, that kind of balance. It's called the unity of the two truths. It's not always easy to do though, because what happens is we sit here, we're feeling spacious, and something comes up and go, what? Not that. And then we get completely lost, right? And so we come back and we go, oh no. And then we have to kind of talk ourselves down a little and say, hey, it's okay. So here, what we're doing is that whether or not it's at the arising level or the after the arising has distracted us, we're just resting with this spacious accommodation that can allow us to feel whatever is coming up in us without preferring the phenomena or appearance over the spaciousness. So we'll try that for a little bit together, and then we'll do a final practice, and then we'll have a discussion. So let's do that for a little bit, just a minute or two. You could call this practice an inner social meditation because all the different parts of us are given a voice, but we're also sort of aware not to let any of our parts dominate the conversation. There's just room for everyone, and we're listening and feeling each other and giving space to each other inside of ourselves, that is. And then you can see how natural honesty and wonder play a role, hanging out in the openness, the uncertainty of the spaciousness, being curious about what needs to be felt in our experience, holding court within ourselves for the different parts of ourselves, but not sort of losing the totality of all the senses being one in this bigger space, and saying, you know what, we all these different parts are also part of one whole, one community of who we are, you could say. So really practicing that honesty, that love, hosting these different experiences. We could equate this practice also with the second sub practice of the third gesture, where we, having reviewed different parts of our history and ourselves, we come into what am I feeling in this moment? And there again, the natural honesty, the wonder, the ability to learn from what is it like to host all of the different parts of ourselves within this spacious awareness without preferring any over the others, without being a a good host or a good um, guess we could say parent too. I mean, just being, giving all the kids equal attention kind of thing. But like, that feeling of like all the senses are different, but they are a unity of experience. So when we did that part at the end of added that instruction to the six senses to see them all as one totality, not really just sort of interflowing into being one whole, that doesn't deny their individualness, right? It doesn't have to be it's a zero and one as opposed to zero or one, right? So you can still know the differences between things, but also have a sense of the wholeness of something. And I think that's a big difference. There's a difference between monolithicness and inclusiveness. There's a big difference, and it's an important difference, and it's based on understanding our nature, right? If we have a sense of this larger spaciousness, we can go, oh, there's difference without hierarchy. There's just many different things going on, but they're part of a whole. So there we go. That's an experience of practicing ultimate and relative love together. Um, I'm curious what kinds of experiences you've had and anything you want to share, and we can try it again in a little bit, but it might be good to check in, make sure it's not, you know, well, then make sure it's connecting, or if there's any questions or insights that might be helpful for us to hear. And also, if you just want to describe what your experience was, that could be helpful too. I know you were doing something. I don't know what it was like for you.
I'm not sure if I can put this into words or not. That, I mean, it really feels like one of those that you had to be there. You had to be in my body. Um, when you invited us to, and putting this into my own words, kind of what you just said about like inviting all of the senses to be open and just flowing in this space. It I had this experience of like the the boundaries of me kind of starting to dissolve and just almost becoming the flow of those sense perceptions, um, almost like a river. And it was just this exquisite tenderness of, um, there's a line in Sacred Path of the Warrior. It's something about your heart is exposed and raw and just so tender that the flap of a butterfly wing, um, it's so that's kind of what was happening for me. And when I talk about that tenderness, there was like there was an ouchiness to it, but it was also very um, like not in a way that I wanted to get away from, kind of. I don't know if that's making any sense at all.
I love it. I love it. And it reminds me, it's a question I've heard you using a lot lately, Janet, of who would I be or how would I be? And I'm thinking, like, who would I be if I didn't tell myself my senses are separate? How would I be if I didn't make distinctions between them? But that they felt that I allowed them to be one whole field of of the simultaneous, right? Now, that is a very particular and subtle instruction, I admit. It's not something that it might be kind of hard to do. And sometimes we might focus on one sense more than another. And that's not a problem. It's not even an obstacle to what we're doing. This is just a kind of an invitation. But the ability to accommodate doesn't require that we do this. I just was equating how we could move into being in a more um, completely open, completely inclusive way, so that we could host the various parts of ourselves that need to come up or need to be heard or felt, depending on what's going on in our life. You know, it might be a little dormant right now, they might be active, but as a skill, I love that we could talk about the skill of love being not just the feeling or affect of care and wanting to remove suffering, but also this inclusive, lucid space of awareness that is our nature, right? That's ultimate and relative love coming together. And I would argue, you know, we've said this 100 times, right? Rangjung Dorje said, in the moment of love, the empty essence dawns nakedly, meaning empty of what? Empty of these conceptual distinctions and the spaciousness of our nature. So when we feel love, we kind of start to feel the spaciousness of our nature. It's in the feeling, in the affect of love. On the other hand, the spaciousness that we feel in meditation could start to produce the affect of love in the relative sense of being able to regard what appears in our experience as worthy of tenderness and respect. But I'm adding in another layer here, aren't I? Which is, what is this sort of lucidity that hosts, or even I called it inner social meditation, that allows us to actually hold court for all of the different parts of ourselves and knows when one part is taking over too much. How do we validate that and feel that, but also say, hold on a moment, sweetie. You're kind of dominating right now. I love you. You have something important to say. I'm listening. Can you let yourself be heard? You know, and I want to hear from the other parts too. And there's this quality of like, they never left, right? I'm focusing on you because you're prominent, but they never left. They've been pushed down now, right? And so this is what I mean by inner social meditation. It's not about, there's no agenda and it's not about, there's no exiling and there's no exaggerating. It's sort of like, can I hold court or hold inner social meditation? Right? That's what I think that element's a little different than just saying ultimate and relative love are spaciousness and affective care and all that. Sure. But I'm saying something more than that. I'm saying, can we actually include all the different things we need to feel without preferring one over the other? And sort of that. So for me, it's a very helpful way of realizing, oh, I'm not letting go of what someone's saying in me or a part of me saying because I need to come back to spaciousness. I'm reminding all of myself that all of myself is present. during this session, during this practice. And that's like a family therapy session. It's like, okay, you've talked now for 5 minutes. There are 4 other people in this family, you know, and we've heard you, we love you, and we now want to ask you to take a step back and let others speak. And I feel like that's not mean, and it's not cruel, and it's actually very helpful. So, but again, do we give ourselves permission to do this? Or maybe we do, but here I'm being explicit about how we might do it. So, yeah.
I
Hi.
have no idea if this fits in, but I'm going to tell you where my brain and soul went.
Okay.
So it's snowing here. So I was watching the snow and it's got those big flakes, and it's so beautiful and gentle. And I start thinking, wow, each of them is unique. And then I start thinking, how can that be possible? And then, well, because each person is unique, and that's phenomenal, you know? And so I was just like in awe of all that. And then somehow my brain said, I am the ocean. And that felt so perfect. It's so true. So I was just floating through nature and just really, really loving it. But I was feeling like the snowflakes are cold and they're wet and they're soft and they're fun. It was just all inclusive. I don't know what it has to do with what we're doing, but there I was.
I love it, Lori. Thank you for sharing. I would say it's absolutely what we're doing, right? The 4 elements are our teachers, you know, nature. And there's the snowflakes are like the uniqueness of all the different parts of our own experience and the world we share. And how can it be so vast and particular? And then the sense of the ocean-like quality. I mean, I really think that's what we're talking about is can we identify with that bigger sense of being the ocean and all the fish and all the things, but like it's beautiful, Lord. Sounds like you're having a good time. I like it. Very cool.
Lori, what you just said, I had to get up and go to my closet and get something that I bought yesterday. I swear this was it jumped off the shelf and just like would not it just like no, I'm going home with you. Yeah, I just am.
Oh, lift it up, Janet. I can't see the nature. Heels. Yes. Oh my God. I love.
No, that's better.
Yeah. Thank you, dear. Oh.
Probably a couple of different layers of meaning to that, but
Oh, I like it. Double entendre. Oh, that's good. It does on both levels. Thank you, Janet. That's awesome. Stephen, what are you feeling?
It felt good to do the sense meditation, the senses meditation. It felt yeah, like coming back home or whatever. And it felt dreamy. Yeah. It made me feel grateful and appreciate just being alive. I think that's yeah, that's how I felt.
Yeah, dreamy. I love that. And I think it's that kind of spaciousness and dreaminess, you could say, that allows us to accommodate when we get angry or when we get frustrated or when we're overwhelmed or we're practicing that, and then it does become a potential resource for like accommodating those energies, like especially that one we did, because if we could just see our emotions and feelings or different perceptions as like clouds amongst snowflakes and oceans of different feelings, right? If we could just allow that and not lose touch with this amazing, brilliant nature that we have that manifests as all of these senses at once. And so when we can kind of accommodate that, it's also a template for being able to accommodate other energies and senses of our emotions, feelings, thoughts, histories, all that. And part of that is the reason I bring that up, Stephen, too, is just like when we get inspired by something, for me, that always touches back into my motivation, right? Like I might reflect on my life and then I might touch what am I feeling right now? But then we know the third gesture, the third sub practice in the gesture is like, okay, why am I practicing right now? What's my inspiration? And to see that and then to dive into the ocean of reality, right? And come back up. And it's like, so I think I love your appreciation and the gratitude. And I feel like that plays into the motivation, especially that third stage of like, okay, what is inspiring me right now? And then diving into that. And I trust that personally. I feel like that kind of leads us wherever we need to go. If we know what's going on, what's inspiring us, and we can kind of touch it. Yeah, beautiful. Lynn, do you have any thoughts you wanted to share or insights or questions?
Yeah, it was such a wondrous practice. It it did feel like it felt magical, and I felt just so grateful, so touched about life and the poignancy of life, and so interesting to see the kind of the going in and out of noticing things and then the widening, or even the present into the past, into the future, here and there. It was so interesting. And even to hear a little voice protesting about something, and it's almost like there was no discussion, but there was sort of a solution that was suggested. One of the things that was interesting that I kind of know, but I didn't know, was that often when I see things, especially if they're things that are familiar, but even if they're not, if they're somehow familiar in my experience, I often will see, and I'm not aware of that I'm actually feeling at the same time the texture. And what I did notice is there's a slight delay or separation, because then often there's a sound and smell that comes with that, even when I don't always have in the moment an actual sound or smell. Although sometimes then I'll actually hear particularly the sound, not necessarily the smell, like right after that. The sound right after that, not so much the smell. Yeah, so it was very wondrous and very touching. Yeah. And on that note, I'm going to tell everyone, thank you. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Lynn. You're welcome. Take care. Oh, that's beautiful. What Lynn was just sharing, like the wonder and I also the interplay of senses. It's wonderful when we let ourselves out of the box and say, you know what if I regard this as a fluid, simultaneous lucidity or luminosity, or appearances are simultaneous. And it really does take us out of the limited conceptual mind, right? When we open to our senses that way, because it's hard, then the thoughts come up and they're kind of like just part of it, right? It's like, oh, hi. I'm like, oh, hi. I was going to try to take over everything. Yeah. Well, you're part of all of it. Yeah, I guess so. So it's like, it's more playfulness or more appreciation can happen, right?
Again, it's what is this if I'm not telling it what it is?
Yes, it's such a great insight question. It's such a great Vipassana question, or to stimulate insight. And you just, the way you said it there beautifully, Janet, right? Like, what is this if I don't tell it what it is, right? Oh, I love that. Because what happens is then when you have an interesting experience, you don't say, yeah, that's not, it's just blank, move along. That's what the kind of conceptual mind wants to do. It's like, oh, it's just a snowflake. It's like, just a snowflake. What happened to you? Whatever happened to you that you got so depressed that you could look at a magical, intricate, unique thing falling in space, shining in light, and you say, just? Like, we need to take you out on the town. You are too upset with everything. So we need to take our thoughts out on the town, let them play with the other senses, be part of that big space, and nature, the two natures that are one nature. The nature heals. I love that, Janet. All right, let's dedicate the merit. All you sentient beings, I have a good or bad connection with. As soon as you have left this confused dimension, may you be born in the Western Sukhavati. And once you're born there, complete the bhumis and the Young! Woohoo! See you. Bye.